समझ नहीं आ रहा अपने सैलरी इंक्रीमेंट का क्या करूं।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स के एसआईपी का टॉप अप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
क्या? समझ में नहीं आया।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स का एसआईपी टॉपअप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
अब समझा।
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme-related documents carefully.
Welcome to the special edition of Worldview with Swasti. President Vladimir Putin's visit to New Delhi, the first in 4 years, comes at a moment of profound geopolitical flux. The global order is shifting, strategic alignments are being recalibrated, and India-Russia relations are navigating both long-standing trust and new complexities. This visit is therefore being watched closely, not just in Delhi, but in capitals around the world. And to unpack what this moment means for the overall security and strategic cooperation between India and Russia, from nuclear stability and arms control to defense technology, China's expanding role, and the future of the Eurasian security landscape, we have with us a distinguished voice from Moscow. And he is Dr. Viktor Mizin. Dr. Mizin is a leading Russian foreign policy and arms control expert and diplomat whose career spans senior positions at the Moscow State Institute of International Affairs, the Russian Academy of Sciences, and as deputy director of the Institute for Strategic Assessments. His expertise on nuclear strategy, non-proliferation, export controls, and great power politics has had him lead several portfolios at the Russian Ministry of Foreign Affairs. For us, he is uniquely placed to help us understand how Moscow's strategic elite view this visit and what expectations Russia brings to the table. With Dr. Mizin, we will explore how the Kremlin perceives the evolving global order, Russia's expectations from India as a responsible nuclear power, the impact of China's rising arsenal and its new nuclear white paper, the strengths and limits of the Sino-Russian partnership, the future of trilateral dynamics, the fate of major defense deal, and of course, what Moscow realistically hopes to achieve during President Putin's visit. Dr. Mizin, what an honor to have you. Welcome to the Worldview.
My pleasure, my honor. Thank you for the kind words. Namaste. And I think without typical Russian dramatization, I could state that this visit of today has a very historical meaning, I dare say, both for India and Russia. Why? For many decades, unlike another major powers like United States and China, India remained, I would say, if not ally, but very trusted friend of the Soviet Union and Russia now. My generation was raised on this Hindi Rusi Bhai, and we know quite well great Indian leaders from Mahatma Gandhi, whom President Putin is quoting frequently, Jawaharlal Nehru, and of course Indira Gandhi. I just remember this catastrophe when she died. I was in the foreign ministry and I made a presentation on that. So, I mean, for me personally, it's very, this family is very close. There've been speculations lately that India now is a very difficult position with the Modi government trying to keep this famous autonomous position, and frankly speaking, being under very strong pressure from so-called collective West, well, at least European powers, at least some people in the US Congress, some conservatives, of course, who are asking why India is so friendly with Russia when Russia is leading this, what is called war. In Russia, it's called special military operation in Ukraine. And of course, this what is, of course, existential, I would say, factor for Russian both foreign and domestic politics. It has a very pronounced impact on Indian-Russian relations, because, as I said, some forces are trying to get India out of this cooperative modus operandi with Russia and make it to join the so-called camp of those who are exerting pressure on Russia, trying to press it to stop the war in Ukraine.
But let me just start with your core expertise. You are somebody who's been doing arms export control and disarmament, etc., and all of that. So let me just begin from there, and we've come to other factors later. So, how would you assess the manner in which the global order is evolving? And in this particular context, of course, we all know that the global order is evolving, but in this particular context, how do you see the New START treaty? Could you tell us a little bit about that? What is Russia's position and expectation now that President Putin is in India and India is a responsible nuclear power? I mean, what do you think can be a conversation, a meaningful conversation on that regard? Because from India's perspective, we are also looking at China's role as its nuclear arsenal keeps rising. So a little bit on the New START treaty and how do you look at the arms race and the nuclear arsenal today overall? Your thoughts on that?
Thank you. I failed to write a book about golden era of disarmament and arms control, but unfortunately, and I think it's common, feeling in political circles in academia worldwide, that the global arms control regime or structure is collapsing now. So many very important cornerstone treaties like ABM Treaty, INF Treaty, Open Skies Treaty have been abrogated. And unlike the Cold War, when the arms control domain was used as a bridge bringing together Soviet Union and the West, now it's becoming a very politicized matter of field of contention, of political struggle, when arms control is being used, as we feel in Russia, as an instrument for exerting pressure on Russian foreign policy. As Putin said, at least under Biden administration, that there could be no progress in arms control at all, while United States is leading what is called in Russia unfriendly politics, meaning not just in bilateral relationship, but American stance on Ukraine, supporting Kiev regime, as it said in Moscow, militarily. And that's why it was a big worry in Russian elite, in Russian academia, about the future fate of arms control and New START in general. The good thing was that it was extended in 2021 until 26. But then there was Russian position that there could be no more, this is very messy word, English word, compartmentalization, that the issue of arms control can't be torn off from the general status of relationship between Russia and United States. And so it was probably returned to the old Soviet position of Andropov times in the 80s, in Reagan era, that nothing could be settled until everything is settled. And so I would say that Biden time was a kind of pause in arms control, and many people, both my friends, gurus, former US ambassadors in America and in Russia, they thought that New START treaty is doomed. But fortunately, something happened. I don't want to cajole him too much because he is a very controversial figure. But with advent of Trump administration, a lot has been changed in Russia-United States relationship, including the New START. there have been some signals that probably even the strategic stability consultations that have been suspended by Biden administration in autumn 22 due to Ukrainian crisis, that they could be resumed. And there have been hopes that even the discussions about the fate of New START and probably what's to be done after it. And Mr. Putin in September, I think, has made very important statement that Russia is ready to comply with the major provisions of New START, probably for 1 year. The response, also very important from Trump, was that it was a good idea. Unfortunately, as I'm afraid it's a customary habit of Trump, nothing happened after that.
Okay, Dr. Mizin, and what about China's role? Because its nuclear arsenal has been rising. Very recently, China has come up with a new white paper on its nuclear policy. I mean, how do you read this sitting in Moscow? I'm interested in understanding what is the Russian
As
strategic
I
elite.
said, I'm sorry to repeat myself, China is, officially strategic partner. But I know that at least Russian military, Russian diplomats are very closely monitoring what's going on with Chinese missile and nuclear arsenal, what is called in United States, if you read the last Department of Defense report on China's nuclear weapons, it is the major source of worry for the Pentagon. You know that more and more missile silos, and practically the attitude, the estimation of the Russian generals, for example, of the former commander, chief of staff of Russian strategic missile forces, General Yeltsin, is that China has all potential to match up even quantitatively with the levels of United States and Russia, probably in mid 30s. So he is corroborating this estimate also of the Pentagon in the last, I think it's 2024 report. So, of course, although we can say that Russia is participating in joint military drills, by the way, like with India, we should remember the recent Indra maneuvers, and is helping China to develop the early warning network in China. And there have been some on paper, what we can staff exercises, how to offstand the American program of missile defenses. But I know that in certain circles of the Russian military, there's just one question, and it is also my question in my recent article: is Russia still targeting China, at least Chinese nuclear forces? And frankly, being a good ally, a strategic partner, China still is tacitly targeting Russia.
But that brings me to this very important question of one of your remarks did mention about how the perception of India in the Russian strategic elite has been. So help me understand. You did mention that especially when it comes to the sense within the Russian strategic elite after the 2000s about how India's relationship with the West has been growing, and this has been a steady perception at your side. So if I can ask you, I mean, how does Russia plan to address New Delhi's concerns? Because there were some concerns earlier on technology and technology sharing, etc. So what is Russia's plan to really preserve this historical relationship? Because the world is changing very fast and all countries are operating in national interest.
Frankly speaking, with all this military technological cooperation, which surely will be discussed probably tomorrow between Prime Minister and Russian President, Russia is ready to provide S-400, S-500, and Sukhoi 57. I know that it will be discussed in details. But what I should say, we now are in some people call the battle for India, because many in Russian elite think that something dramatical should be probably done by Russia just to keep India, which remains now under tremendous pressure from United States, from Europe, trying to tear it away off from this Russian friendship. And I know we understand it in Moscow, and we revere it, how difficult it is for Indian government to keep this mediator, I would say, median position with developing both good relations with United States, with European Union. Just it was like recent communique. Also, I mean, regarding I must say this Chinese factor, but Russia would do everything, and I think that this is the gist, the main thrust of today's visit of Mr. Putin.
Like you mentioned that you mentioned something very interesting. You said that in Russian strategic elite there is a phrase which is quite popular, which is the battle for India.
Yes.
And sitting in New Delhi, it is very interesting to hear, I mean, how other powers are perceiving us and how they are perceiving our foreign policy choices. But you mentioned one of the things that Russia is planning to do is to really take the relationship to the next level, because of course there is a lot of historical goodwill and friendship, and we all know that. But one of the most significant geopolitical changes that India has perceived, which is contrary to Indian national interest since the war in Ukraine began in 2022, is the deepening of the Sino-Russian alliance, right? And only yesterday, Russia enabled, or maybe 2 days ago it was, that Russia enabled visa-free travel to all Chinese nationals, etc. Now, I do understand, because I work on this theater, that the China-Russia alliance is not etched in stone. It has its own strengths and it has its own weaknesses. But I would want to understand from you, what is the view of how the Russia-China equation will play out? What are its strengths? But more than that, what are its weaknesses? What are the limitations? Because that is something that we are really interested in understanding in New Delhi as well.
I'm not great believer that something like a trilateral, if you want, entente or alliance of India, China, Russia could happen. Despite
And
the
why
fact,
do you say that? And why do you say that? Because there is a lot of strategic push for it. We see that
that's why I say, and I
there
can
is a
believe, it's exactly my point. I understand what is behind this initiative, and I know that now the Modi's government trying to do something to embetter relationship, to alleviate all concerns, all problems of the past. But I think that the differences still are very strong. Fortunately, it could happen. But returning to China, for China, I think it's not me who is saying this, but American experts. They think that despite all official pronouncement from the leadership of China, from Chinese MFA, that China is interested in the speedy settlement of this conflict, China is still, the Western sources say, helping Russia, providing something like drones technology, microchips, and some people also in United States academia state that China is interested deeply in procrastination of this war in Ukraine, because it's deflecting United States from Taiwan. And I think that it should be used by Modi's government, like Russia could be having both, I dare say, good relations, friendly relations, both with China and India, is unique position. It could act as a mediator, probably, if it's acceptable to Modi's government.
Okay. And do you think that this is something that President Putin is going to be discussing with Prime Minister Modi the 2 days that he's here?
I would say that probably not openly, because even diplomatically, even humanly, it's very uneasy to discuss a third party. I think that what would be discussed, how to promote the bilateral relations.
Yeah,
I
Dr.
think that what will be discussed,
Yeah.
how to find modalities without hurting Modi's government relations with United States, with European Union, how to continue, how to promote bilateral, I should say, trade and relations in defense, military, technological areas.
So why is China so crucial for Russia? Of course, I know geopolitically and strategically, but when it comes to, for example, providing technology, so what kind of technology do you think is coming from China that makes China so important to you?
I just completed article on that. It's very interesting that before the war and specifically in the beginning of 2000 years, the European Union provided about 70% of all high technologies to Russia, which was, of course, very important. And we know that under sanctions, this is now almost completely cut off. Probably there are some gray area importations, but it's cut off. So China has become already the major, not just major political or diplomatic foreign policy ally, but the major provider of all technologies, even of hardware. You know that I think that Russian, for example, car market is now dominated not by German or Japanese, but Chinese companies. It's very evident, it's very visible in the streets of Russian major cities. So Russia, it's not a strategic or geopolitical factor. It's also the major economic factor. Some ultra nationalistic voices here even lament that Russia is becoming subjugated by China. And just recently, the head of the major Russian oil Rosneft company said that Russia's role in the future would be like fossil, carbons provider, hydrocarbons provider from China. Of course, not many people in Russian elite, they love, this posture, this position. But I think that now it's becoming a fact of life. Whereas for China, of course, Russia is the great market, which is also important. Just recently, all visits regime for Chinese and Russians has been abrogated. So we're expecting the flood of Chinese tourists in Russia. Russian position is very important. And some Chinese figures were asking me, Victor, what if we start something on Taiwan? What would be Moscow position? And my response was, of course, Russia would abstain from aiding you openly militarily, despite all these, strategic alliance documents. But it will be very vocally supporting Chinese stance, Chinese position.
But now let me just bring back the attention to our bilateral ties. And of course, defense continues to be a very important segment. And while I'm not sure if we are going to go ahead with major announcements per se, or do we have to wait, more for that? But I know that very lucrative offers have been made to India, and I mentioned that a little while ago, by Russia. For example, S-400s and 500s, and also the Sukhoi 57 jets. Now, I want to understand from you that while we know that Russia is giving us a, complete TOT for that and all that, but how does the Russian side plan to go ahead with the, let's say, the spare parts and the deliveries? Because they have been cut off from the Western tech and chips, and you mentioned that. And I would also want to understand that India is still waiting for the remaining two consignments of the S-400 systems. So as we are waiting for the remaining two S-400 to come to India, how do you think, technically speaking, Russia is in a position to also provide us with all the spare parts that we need, with all the maintenance that we need? I mean, realistically speaking, do you think that this is something that can happen now, or this is something which will happen after the war in Ukraine ends?
Well, I think that Russia would love to do anything right now. We know that India traditionally was one of the major, I would say, friends or recipients in this. Not just recipient, we know how many joint ventures are working even today. So it's very important for Russia. I know that I am sure that it could take a very important part in the discussions with Indian side now during this visit, and Russia would strive to do. But the problem, of course, it's a very difficult. It's castet kind of very kind of riddle intellectually, politically, how to circumvent, how to dodge the pressure of sanctions. It would be very difficult, and that Russian foreign policy here should be very inventive and innovative.
Okay, all right, Victor. And just because we are mentioning these as a consequence of the war in Ukraine, and of course the sanctions because of the war in Ukraine, etc., let's come to the latest set of negotiations around this war. Now, as you know, these have proved to be very difficult. Even Trump has said that he thought it's going to be easy, but they have turned out to be very difficult. In fact, the latest round of talks between Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner with the Russian side in Moscow, I think they have not been able to produce any results. So, I mean, in many ways, it's back to square one right now. But in your assessment, when do you assess the war in Ukraine to end in a realistic manner?
Frankly, Russia was not very pleased too much when just after the beginning of the war, Modi said something that this war should be discontinued, although there was no. Yeah,
This is not a war. Yeah.
there was no specific plan, but I think it's openly was said that there have been some discussions that India is for the quickest settlement, that India, like China, warned Russia against using tactical nukes, although it has been never, idea of Putin. It's all speculations from the West. But now, there've been too much of elation, too many fake news and leakages regarding what you said, this flurry of exchange of visits with the special envoy of Mr. Trump, of Mr. Witkoff, with his this frequent, visits to Mr. Putin. But unfortunately, unlike many commentators, and many commentators here, for example, my liberal journalist friends, they predicted that the war could end in the end of 23, 24. Now, I think that, the feeling, at least in NATO, as I am reading, is that the war can't be stopped, can't be discontinued immediately. Why? Because there's no common ground between the position of major participants. Like Russia wants all these four regions which have been included in the Russian constitution.
Yes.
It would like to shrink Ukrainian army to the level which was stated in Istanbul drafts communiques in 2022. I think it's 85,000. It wants something like that Russian language would be declared second official language in Ukraine. I mean, all this is completely unacceptable for Kiev. More than that, I think that if Zelensky would dare to accept all these Russian or what is called ultimatums in Ukraine, it would cause his not just political but probably physical death, because it's unacceptable for, I would say, majority of military commanders in Ukraine. Frankly, there's no progress at all, because it's my point, which, as I am refraining here when I speak to TV or radio, there's no common ground and positions are still irreconcilable. And for Kiev, it's unacceptable to acknowledge, to agree to comply with the Russian demands, which is called ultimatum, which is leading to complete subjugation, to complete elimination of Ukrainian statehood. And it's impossible, at least, to recognize that those four regions which Russia claims are hers. Ukraine would need a referendum, which is practically, technically unthinkable now because the state is in the war. So I don't, probably it's too pessimistic. I don't see any light in the end of tunnel. And I know that this also would be discussed in the coming negotiations with Indian government.
So, in your opinion, too, there is no quick end to the Russia-Ukraine.
No. Unfortunately, although there have been some predictions that it could stop quite soon, in a month or probably in the first months of the coming year. Unfortunately, I don't see any ground for that. I think Russia is triumphant, slowly, but it's moving forward, like it's being said, liberating more and more small towns in Donbass, coming closer to Zaporizhia. So for Russia, logically, there's no motivation for any settlement solution to any ceasefire, unfortunately. And for Ukraine, for Zelensky, the only choice is to continue what he is doing now, asking for more help from the West. But he is in a very precarious position because Trump would like to make Ukraine his another foreign policy great accomplishment, like stopping this ninth war, as he said. And so I know, and it's open, that he is like compelling Zelensky to be more pliable and to accept probably some Russian demands.
Okay. On that note, Dr. Victor Mizin, thank you so much for taking the time out and helping us unpack this complex.
I hope it was helpful, and we all wish that this visit would further promote this Indian-Russian friendship. So, Hindi Rusi, bhai, once again.
Yes, on that note, Hindi Rusi Bhai Bhai. Of course, this was the mood, back in the day, and I think this is also the right time to reinvent the bilateral relationship. And we are all looking forward to what are the key.
Despite not being naive, despite all the difficulties that we have mentioned in my talk.
Of course, and that is what makes you such an important voice, to be heard too. Yes, and thanks again for taking the time out. I really appreciate this. And you were watching Worldview with Swasti. Stay tuned for yet another episode on the special series on President Putin's visit to India.
Thank you so much. My pleasure.
Yeah.